So, welcome everyone. I'm very honored to have a mentor and friend, Drupon Pema Rigdzin. He is a retreat teacher, guide in the Dujun Tersar tradition, and also a chaplain, as well as having a very unique background in the medical field or therapeutics and pastoral care. So, one of the topics today is Vajrayana chaplaincy and Vajrayana ritual healing. So, welcome, Drupon Pema Rigdzin. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, James. I'm very happy to be here. I not only because I liked very much the past interviews you did, but because for those who don't know, I know James since May 2004 when he came with a very long hair, opened a beautiful kata and offered it to Lamat Hartin. And I believe it was like the first connection. And I was there for that moment and have been accompanying in one way or another all the wonderful things you have been developing. And I feel very humbled and happy to be here. It's a privilege.
We're very honored to have you. Lamatarchin was like a lord of the mandala, and it's through really this blessing that I meet you and some of my root teachers. So, welcome. And I wanted to begin this conversation because you have such a unique background. Every time I reach out to you or speak to you, I'm so amazed at how you're integrating both traditional medicine and Vajrayana and extensive retreat experience. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in medicine, therapeutics, or pastoral care? I believe there was experience with physical therapy, acupuncture, traditional medicine. Please give us a little context.
Well, I was born with my umbilical cord around my neck. That's a very good way to arrive because I arrived in the world totally blue. They had to resuscitate me and and I think that put me in the categories of those who are between here and there, between living and dying, so to speak. But with 3 months old, I got baptized by a Brazilian Native American spirit called Disenchantment. We say Desengano. And he has been ancestral protector of my family through many years. I grew up within one of the many shamanic religions in Brazil, because we don't have one or two or three, we have many. We have Umbanda, Candomblé, Jurema, Catimbó Jurema, Tereco, Tambor de Mina, Encantaria. It goes, it just goes. And the particular one my family was following was Umbanda, in which ancestral spirits from African background, Native American background, and Catholic background, they manifest through the bodies of people, of mediums, in order to a certain extent, purify their karma, also to continue their mission or improve their mission on Earth through descendants that have some kind of karmic connection. Within Umbanda, we have in various degrees that can be very intense or very light, the worship of the forces of nature. Those forces come from Nigeria. They're called Orisha, but I'm not going to extend myself very much because it's much more complex than this. And that's where I grew up, literally watching Umbanda sessions every Friday. By the other hand, my mom was very interested in spiritist doctrine. That is a religion created by a Frenchman called Allan Kardec in the 19th century. And that gave a very good doctrinal background to Umbanda, because Umbanda is basically you and the spirits. So that's the story of my growing up. A little bit of Umbanda, a little bit of Spiritist, and because I am from Brazil, Catholic too. For many years, my mom said, I'm not so sure exactly what we're going to be, so just go to the Mass every Sunday. Which became very good because as a chaplain, I can relate very well with especially Catholic and Latin American patients that have not only the Catholic, but also the more curandero or healer kind of approach that we see in all countries of Latin America. Actually, this happens in Europe too. What we call the praying old ladies. They exist from Italy all the way to Portugal. This was not invented in Brazil, but definitely it was increased in Brazil. Well, when I was 12 years old, my mom gave me a tarot deck and said, I want you to read to me in 1 week. And I told my mom, I have no idea how to do this. And my mom said, that's your problem. So basically, after 1 week, I remember it was a Friday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we sat and, okay, let's start. You read for me. And reading oracles, in particular tarot, it's something that I spent many years doing since I was 12 years old until more or less 1992, 1993, and I will explain why I stopped. And also ceremonies. We got accustomed to, in Brazil, to whatever problem we have. We go to the doctor, we go to the lawyer, but we also go to the Umbanda priest. I remember since I was a teenager, my mom would say, okay, today is October 31st, the best day to do black magic against someone. You go to the crossroad, put some liquor and cigar, and ask for protection so we don't get any black magic. So I think I was 15 years old. My mom called me at home and said, I'm going to be fired. Can you do something? And I said, okay. I have no idea what I was going to do. And she said, okay, just do something because I'm about to be fired. And I went to the fridge. I got lettuce. I put 2 candles there and I offered to a certain entity who likes lettuce, and it worked. My mother's boss arrived and he said, oh, something changed. So that's how I started to do ceremonies, even not having any idea whatsoever how to do it. And this is very much because my mom used to say, find a way to get a solution. And by 1992, I I started to feel very, I don't know, unhappy with reading tarot, because it was always the same thing. Does he love me? I'm going to get this job. And I felt there was no depth in what I was doing. So I thought I need to find something new for me to be. This is not working. That time I was studying history in downtown Rio, getting my BA in history that I actually didn't conclude. And making it short, I ended up meeting a very good acupuncturist who at that same week was starting to teach a 3 years course in acupuncture. No, 4 years. And I thought, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to start studying acupuncture. At the same time, I started studying shiatsu, and I went to an old friend called Georges Charbel Farah, a very good oraculist. And I asked him, am I doing the right thing? And we had a session with Tarot, and he said, yes, that's your path, but let me see here. Would be good if you do something else that's more official. Because acupuncture was not legalized at that point in Brazil. And he said, okay, let's try physical therapy. Ooh, perfect. So I entered at the same time in the physical therapy college. And no, it was later. But anyway, my whole approach to physical therapy was basically using Chinese medicine. Even though I was not necessarily allowed to put needles here and there, but I would use a lot of acupressure. And later, after I graduated, one of my teachers called me to work in his clinic, and I was just working with acupuncture and Chinese medicine and nothing else. So I learned acupuncture from this old lady called Ana Lucas da Silva, unbelievable intuitive healer. She had a total grasp in acupuncture, but independent of that, her intuitive capacities were just unbelievable. What I saw her doing, it was hard to believe. And at the same time, I entered in a formal school called CASTA, or Center of Acupuncture, Shiatsu, and Alternative Medicines. And I studied with this gentleman called Paulo Benevide. We are still best friends. He just sent me a zap yesterday. We still talk. And he was the one who introduced me to Chinese herbology, using Brazilian herbs, kinesiology applied to acupuncture, astrology applied to acupuncture, and yes. And finally, to finish, I also had another very important guide who died years ago, Professor Antônio Augusto de Azevedo Cunha. He was like my best friend, my teacher. He taught me Tueina, Japanese acupuncture, chiropractic, so many things. And I'm very, 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 very deeply appreciative of those three, Ana, Paulo, and Professor Cunha. And his death, unfortunately, was one of the greatest losses for acupuncture in Rio, for sure. Okay, this is my background.
Yes.
In 1997, I met Lama Tarchin Rinpoche. Have been a student of Chagdu Rinpoche since '94, and one of my biggest aspirations was to do a 3-year retreat. Has always been, and making the story a little short, in 2004 I came to the Pema to do a 6 months retreat to finish my Guru Yoga. Lama Tarchin said, 12 boom? Oh, that's nothing. You can do 36 boom. Oh, okay, I will do 24 boom and complete. And said, no, 36 more boom. So I spent basically 5 months doing this. And at the end of that personal retreat, Rinpoche opened the possibility of a 3-year retreat, that he was going to be very active, literally there almost the whole time. And I did 1 3-year retreat, 2 3-year retreats. When I left, I left 3-year retreat, Lama Tarchin said, no, you are going to stay inside. You continue. And he said, yeah, help them to do, help them to know what to do. And if they have any question, you answer. And that's how it started in 2012. Then 2013, unfortunately, Lama Tarchin went back to Zandok Pauri. The day after he passed, Lama Sonam said, okay, now you are the Drupon. And yeah, that's basically the story. And that's what I have been doing the last 10 years. I think it was in 2015, my wife, Lee, got really sick with a very confusing disease. And I accompanied her for 2.5 months in the hospital in Stanford. And I also accompanied the work of the chaplains, in particular, Chaplain Liz Hamel, old Dharma sister from Chagdu Gompa. And she and the other chaplains and Lee sort of pushed me, and you should become a chaplain. And that's how I did a 1-year residency in chaplaincy in Stanford. I did also, I think, half a year of, how can I say, fellowship in Stanford. And after that, I became a relief chaplain for Stanford and relief chaplain for the Hospice of Santa Cruz in the Santa Cruz County. There are many more stories, but this is the short version.
Thank you, Drupon. Before we move into discussing the intersections of healing and Vajrayana and this term Vajrayana chaplaincy, before I forget, more and more I'm meeting Vajrayana practitioners or those that have an interest in Buddhist practice, but have some connection to indigenous traditions, or even so I'm wondering if you have any advice or insight for those who are looking to stay in contact with their native heritage and also practice Buddhism. Do you have insight at how they interact and how important it is to stay in touch with your ancestral or indigenous or family heritage and still practice Vajrayana in your culture?
This is a very muddy water to cross. And I will tell you why. Because if you get what is written in every single refuge teaching, it says that you should give up taking refuge in local gods. how you're going to take refuge in the triple gem, and you are going to deal with what we call Jiktempa, or mundane deities. Well, I think the first thing is having a fortune to have a lama like Lama Tarchin Rinpoche. Lama Tarchin Rinpoche was very much supportive of me going into healing. He pushed me a little bit, but at that time I just came out of a retreat. I was in a very weird place, United States. I have been for 8 years in the United States inside of a retreat center, right? So suddenly, didn't work very well. But Lama Tarchin was very much supportive of any kind of healing. From time to time, he would say, "Ooh, I don't know what's going to happen. Can you do a mo?" So he himself did a lot of mo throughout his life until he just sucked. But he would tell me, "Can you do a mo?" So I feel supported by that aspect. But I think there is a story about Lama Tarchin's life that was really touching to me. He was like 5, 6 years old, and his father, Lama Timedorji, or Tamia Lama, he would take him for an oracle. And his father would do the puja to create the sacred space for this oracle. And it was a very old lady. And when she got possessed by the ancestral spirits, the Jiktempas, she would jump and move her body like she was 16. And Rinpoche always found it incredible because after the session, she was that old 80 years old lady. And they had a great interaction. And for Rinpoche, since he was, the story is much more complex than this, but the point I want to make is Rinpoche grew up with his father, on one hand, working with oracles, working with spirits inside of mediums, the same way that we do in Brazil. And Lama Tarchin's house in Tamia, in Compo, was a psychiatric institution. They had 2 floors. The first floor was full of cells where people would come and just throw literally in their doorsteps their mentally unstable loved ones. And because of the grade of instability, they would have to put inside of those cells and locked. Lama Tarchin's father would do pujas from the traditional kind all the way to shooting. They had a rifle, shooting the patients, and the bullets would transform in Vajrayana or Hayagriva imprints. So he would do that part. He would also pull his dreadlocks and whip his patients. And Lama Tarchin's mom, Amakandro, she would make the medicine with her food. She would prepare for each patient magical food that would transform them from inside outside. So learn how much Rinpoche's family was strong in healing, it was always not only very inspiring, but it also gave me the permission to continue to do what I do, what I always did. And Lama Tarchin, when he was a teenager, he did a lot of healing pujas for other people. But what would happen is that Rinpoche would get sick. He would have the same symptoms of the patient for a couple of days. And one day his mother said, I don't want my son getting sick from other people's diseases by healing them. And she talked to Lama Tarchin's father, and he said, okay. He's no longer doing healing pujas. And Rinpoche had to stop because of that. So, addressing your actual question, the first thing I would like to say is, look at Lama Tarchin. His life and his family are a great inspiration. That's part number one of the answer. Part number two of the answer. If you go to Tibet, I had the chance to go 2 times to Amdo. There are two religions, two Buddhist religions. The literate people, like monks, nuns, ngakpas, who do the pujas the way we do pretty much here in the US, believe it or not. And there are the illiterate people, which are the great part of the people in Tibet. What they do: prostrations, manies, and memorized prayers like the Leuduma. And they will offer sang all day, sur all evening, and connect specifically with the local gods of their places. So I remember talking with Ngakpa and Repon. The first thing we do with a baby when the baby is born is to offer the baby to our ancestral god. That's the god of the mountain behind us. And then we take to a lama to give refuge. So the notion of ancestral gods is very strong amongst Tibetans. They are not going to invoke ancestral spirits as we do in Brazil, but they are going to definitely invoke ancestral gods and the ancestral deities. Every single mountain, every single lake has a ancestral spirit. I'm pretty sure that Mount Loma Prieta, Mount Unamon, Pacific Ocean, and the pond in Pema Oceolim, we don't even need to think about, because Nankadrima Rinpoche already had visions of Mingon Karpo and Dukyon Karmo. So that's the second thing. Tibetans do it. Now, actually answering your question, you need to be in contact with your ancestral world. For example, I'm Brazilian, and I am in contact through my Umbanda, but you are Korean. You have the bloodline of the Mudan. So, what the Mudan do? What kind of connection the Mudan offer? For the so-called whites in United States, because majority of people here are from United States, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because we don't know majority coming from a Protestant Christian background. It's really complex trying to trace back lineage of animistic and natural religious connection. It is complicated, but Black Americans, for example, just go down to Louisiana and you are going to find a lot of hoodoo and voodoo. The roots are still pretty much alive there. Native Americans, the roots are still pretty much alive. And for Latin Americans, that is a funny way United States have to call Native Americans who speak English. Still, there is a Catholic background that it's pretty much inseparable from the world of healing, of what we call curanderas, curanderos. And this knowledge is available, especially here in California, Texas. One of the greatest healers of 20th century, Senor Palomino, he had his world of healing down there in Texas. It was not in Mexico. So there is so much, but you need to dig back on your family, dig back in your, from where your family comes. What are the phenomena there? Travel there. Only recently that I discovered that Trancoso, my last name, is actually a river that goes from Spain to Portugal. Only recently that I discovered that we are the people of the river. So you need to stick, you need to spend time. And once it's clear what's your lineage, what your roots, then you need to be very clear that you take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, all the way to enlightenment, for enlightenment, to benefit all sentient beings without exception. And you are going to do this, and you're going to rely completely on this for your reaching enlightenment. But you are going to probably take some kind of relative refuge in medicine, doctors, social workers, police, perhaps army, if things get weird in the international level, plumbers. You're going to take refuge in the clerk. You might have to take refuge also, not ultimate, but a relative refuge for a certain amount of time in worldly humans and worldly deities that you are connected to. That's my point of view.
Very helpful. I'm looking forward to share this response. So let's begin this discussion of Vajrayana and healing. Is there something you would share about a Vajrayana chaplaincy? How to integrate the wealth of Vajrayana practices in the world of spiritual or pastoral care? Buddhism is a small percentage, and amongst that, it seems largely influenced by Zen tradition. Is there something that's unique to Vajrayana practice that lends to pastoral care, or anything that you would share in that regard?
I think what became the most well-known form of intervention within the Buddhist world has been mindfulness. Mindfulness is becoming the new yoga. And mindfulness as as a way to obtain a more peaceful, controlled, and sane mind. That's wonderful. Absolutely. There's no question about that. It's absolutely wonderful. And if you are a Buddhist chaplain with the wealth that mindfulness can bring to you, Theravada based chaplain, as great part of the Buddhist chaplains that I know, I think you must use the tools from Theravada, especially the so-called mindfulness, Shamatha Vipassana. That's the name of the thing, and helping people. If you have a Zen background, Pure Land background, you should use the meditative and tools that Zen offers. The reading of sutras, but you need to know what those sutras can be used for and how much the idea of a Pure Land, be it in 100% a Buddhist point of view or whatever a Pure Land might mean for other religious groups. Of course, as Buddhists, we sort of seen those more like God realms. People want to go to the realm of God, but still, there is a lot that you can bring up from the Pure Land world. But when we talk about Vajrayana, there are two aspects in Vajrayana. You have Vajrayana, yes, Vajrayana, the same way it's practiced in Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet, and Japan. How it came all the way from India. Vajrayana is reputed to be the receptacle of the 84,000 teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, and therefore it's reputed to have the applicable means to end any kind of suffering. And you need to always start with taking refuge and no, I'm not talking about saying Sangecha Danto Kichonam La. No, I'm not talking about that. When they talk about taking refuge, I'm talking about helping people to understand how much we are creating suffering with our actions, because taking refuge, it's not only to do Sangecha Danso Kichonan La, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, but it's taking refuge in the cultivation of causes of happiness. This is a work that we must do as chaplains. Show people how much we need to stop to destroy our own lives, creating suffering for ourselves. That's number one. Number two, bodhicitta. Bodhicitta applies to anyone or just for Vajrayana practitioners? Well, Mahayana practitioners by definition, but the four immeasurables, the six paramitas, they are a very elegant system of mind training for creating the causes of happiness for oneself and others, specifically the four immeasurables, and the six paramitas are a very elegant way to bring action into our lives, or our lives into action. Okay, this is not Vajrayana. No, it's not Vajrayana. We are talking about refuge bodhicitta. I'm talking about sort of individual liberation and Mahayana. Now, when we talk about Vajrayana, Vajrayana is a world that is introduced by means of empowerment. And it depends on, it relies on the relationship with a guru. And more than that, yes, there is the external guru, but the external guru is needs to be understood also at the same time as the reflection of our own awakened state. Therefore, this basis is necessary for the individual who wants to apply chaplaincy. For the individual who wants to receive chaplaincy, we need to meet the individual where the individual is. You cannot teach Chaplaincy or Avalokiteshvara meditation to a patient who creation and completion to a patient who doesn't have refuge bodhicitta, has no empowerment. But you can meet a patient that's open with Om Mani Padme Hum. We have three situations that always should be seen, observed in chaplaincy. One is forgiveness, the other one is relatedness, and meaning. So how are we going to apply Vajrayana to forgiveness? Well, Vajrayana has classical methods like purification mantras and confession ceremonies, self-empowerment ceremonies. How is that going to be applicable to any person? We need to think about that as Vajrayana practitioners. Second, relatedness. Lots of people are suffering from lack of connection, lack of relatedness, by loneliness. How are we going to apply that to a world of a Vajrayana that is so strong on leaving the world and practicing in solitude? That's a good question for us to ask ourselves. And the third was meaning. We have been using meaning a lot in chaplaincy to bring patients back to motivation. What's your motivation to live? What's your motivation? What does it mean for you so that that makes your life meaningful? And then we come to patients and talk about the 4 thoughts that may transform the mind towards Dharma. It looks really depressing talking about those things. So the problem with Vajrayana is that there are those restrictions, and not every single patient is going to be open to those thoughts. That is one side of the answer. Now let's go to the other side of the answer, what you can do. Of course, depending on the nature of the patient, you can use everything I said before and somehow try to find points, individual points of resonance between the Vajrayana skillful means and the patient potential to absorb it. On the other hand, In Vajrayana, you also have something called skillful means. Lama Tartin used to say, oh, all those ceremonies are a matter of skillful means. And how do you apply this skillful means? Well, first of all, I think chaplains, Vajrayana chaplains, to call themselves Vajrayana chaplains, they should be doing creation and completion. Should do mondro, creation of your idam, and completion through the 6 practices of completion with framework and Dzogchen Mahamudra in the context of completion without framework. Why? Because a lot of the ceremonies that are offered, they depend on you have gained some kind of relationship and confidence in your practice of idam. Having said that, once you have that stable, yes, then you can do 2 things: assessment and prescription. Assessment, well, you can, as a doctor or a Vajrayana practitioner, be skilled in reading pulses. That's a great way to read emotions. But it's not medicine. Well, guess from who I had my first pulse reading class, from Lama Tartin, actually. Pulse, it's a great way to read emotions, cutting through all the speech layers that might take years for you to cut through. There is, for example, in the Utopiantic, there is mirror divination. That was Lama Tartin's favorite. Mirror divination. You can use a melon to do divination. That will give you direct images and insights on what is going on with the patient. You need to learn astrology to understand the cycles. Today, I did perhaps 5 or 6 divinations for clients, and my mo said you need to do this. You can do this, but it was the astrology who said don't do it in this time of the year, do in that time of the year. Without knowledge of astrology, you can say, let me see, you can sell this house. Yeah, that's a good idea. And then you go in the astrology who says, yeah, but not until the end of the year, not until October. Oh, so those 2 things need to walk together. A Vajrayana chaplain should learn astrology and divination, mala divination. You can use mala divination to create numbers for Ijin, or you can use cowrie shells, or you can use dice if you want. You can do dice divination, use systems like, for example, the Tserima from the Dungeon Tercer, which we use a dice made of conch, but you can also use the system from Manjushri system from Mipam Rinpoche that use a dice with the Om Ara Pat Shanadi. All of that will give you an insight in the profundity of the visible and invisible obstacles that people are suffering, that you are not going to get simply just by talking and listening. Listening is so important. You are not going to do this without listening. Sorry, you must have the classic chaplaincy insights on listening. You need to have the chaplaincy insights on intervention, on meiotic intervention, but we are Vajrayana practitioners. We see a world where all our phenomena is a reflex of our minds. And we also acknowledge a phenomena of beings that have feelings, thoughts, trajectories that meet with us, but beings who are invisible. Why we do practices like song? Why we do practices like sur, chid, water torments? Because there are so many invisible suffering beings, and their suffering can meet with us. We need to have the right methods of assessment to find those imbalances, be in the internal level, external level, including the invisible and the secret level. And when you talk about, okay, so basically that's what I have to say about chaplaincy. No, I talked about assessment, now we need to talk about ceremonies. Once we are able to assess the different kinds of sufferings or disturbances or imbalances happening with your patient, you need to be skillful with the methods of assessment to choose good methods to bring balance. In Brazil, we use baths, we use smoke, we use what we call leaf bed, where you use leaves, herbs under your cushion, under your mattress, no, under your sheet. You use herbs for baths, use herbs for smoke, use herbs with you in pouches. Perhaps we can call that mojo bags in English. We can use, for example, animal products. Like, for example, rooster feather can be a great skillful means to give strength and movement to someone who is stuck on something. In I Ching, we call parka in Tibetan. You might have to use, if you find a person who comes with the trigram thunder, you might use a meteorite as a way to bring thunder energy in this person's life, or an aquamarine to bring water trigram power in this person's life, and so forth. We have so many ceremonies like Yanguk to connect back with the flow of prosperity. True water ceremonies for cleansing the head, and what we call in Portuguese, or better saying in Yoruba, ori, for healing of your head and cleansing contamination. We can use chud methods for like chambugyatsa, tapa, and other methods within chud, including dur, for giving direction for ghosts, so to speak, who are creating disease. And you have so many different ceremonies. We would spend hours talking about that, so I think I think I'm going to stop here, going in the ceremonies one by one, but it's almost infinite. But there is one thing I really want to emphasize, just to close this. The Vajrayana practitioner needs to see, no, the Vajrayana chaplain needs to use all those skillful means to alleviate people's suffering. But the Vajrayana practitioner needs to use one's own practice to overcome their own karma. Because everything we are suffering is based on karma. One example, I have a very good Dharma sister, the Alopan Yudrin Womu, who was talking about Nagas with Lama Pema Dorje, our common teacher. And Lama Pema Dorje said, oh yes, Nagas are the manifestation of the ignorance of our own mind, and that's how we need to see it. That's how we should meditate. Yes, that's what a Vajrayana practitioner does. And then there was some ceremony at Lama Pema Dorje's house, Yudrin's house, and one gentleman came, had some kind of sore, and Lama Pema Dorje said, yeah, that's a Naga disease. You need to do some kind of Naga ceremony for that person. And then Lama Pema Dorje turned to Yudrin and said, but you need to recognize that Nagas are the ignorance of your own mind. I might not be quoting this perfectly, word by word, but that's the difference. Vajrayana, when you are the practitioner, you need to go back to the basics of recognizing mind as and duality as the origin of the split and of karma manifestations, and apply diligently the two kinds of accumulations and purification through Vajrasattva to your path, always looking for Guru Yoga as the way to reveal the qualities of the nature of mind.
Drupon, this was so helpful. I'm feeling that perhaps it would be warranted a follow-up to really go through some more of these ceremonies or skillful means. But before we finish today, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about this one ceremony that you'll be teaching on from the Khandro Tuktik. And it's a water cleansing ritual. And I thought to discuss a number of these ceremonies, but this is something you'll be teaching on soon. Is there something you could tell us about water cleansing rituals? What is the Khandro Tuktik, and why specifically? What was inspiring you to begin teaching this ritual or ceremony?
Well, before the pandemic, Vajrayana Foundation became partner with the Wisdom Center of Santa Cruz on promoting activities, and I was asked if I would like to do something, and I said, yes, I want to do ceremonies. Why? Because we need to give back to the society what society has been giving to us in terms of support. So my motivation was always that: bring back to society what we are capable of doing, and alleviating suffering. The pandemic hit us exactly when I was going to do a ceremony. I don't remember. I think it was Chambu Gyatso. And once the Wisdom Center of Santa Cruz reopened, I started to offer ceremonies, because as much as I love teaching, there are better teachers around. But I like very much the ceremony. It is divided in 3 parts. The first part is the evocation of the dakinis of the 5 families and the 5 elements within the vase. And that vase of water in which there is saffron is going to become a medium for cleansing, obscurations, contaminations. There are the deep-seated contaminations of obscurations of the 5 emotions. And a little bit of water is going to clean my 5 emotions. Actually, it can definitely have a deep power, because you are not talking about just water. You are talking about the dakinis of the 5 elements, the consorts of the 5 families of Buddhas. It's very important to understand that we are not dealing with ordinary water or saffron water. We are talking about the embodiment of the 5 Buddha families in their female form. Then the next step is to wash the head. Not only deep-seated patterns of obscurations, but there are also patterns of contaminations. Like, for example, everybody drives in California, and sometimes someone offers you a mandala offering, right? Sashi, Poshu, from the other car that you just cut in the highway. The intention behind that mandala offering can actually create an impact on you. Someone who speaks harshly with you can let an imprint. Your mother, when you were 6 years old and said that you are totally useless, can leave an imprint. Enter a place where there was a very strong emotional discussion, argument, can leave an imprint. And the name of this imprint is drip, contamination. So this practice is very much specialized in cleansing that. Having said that, the next step is una limpia. Para ustedes que hablan español, ou para vocês que falam português, es una limpia. Ou então é descarrego. Basically, we use feathers, like peacock feathers, to massage the energy in the body and everything that is stuck in the body into the water. It's an external cleansing of what is stuck there. And the third part of the ritual is offering to the invisible beings who might be attached to our happiness and suffering this water, and visualizing it as an ocean of ambrosia and sending it for a very far region from us, where they can be delighted by the blessings of the dakinis of the 5 families and therefore find liberation. So that is the traditional Tibetan narrative. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal take on this. This is not necessarily the understanding of Tibetan Buddhism, but we make head washing in Brazil. It can be called in some traditions. Oh, gente, como é que fala isso? Well, head washing. Head washing. Yeah, I forgot the technical word we use. Because the head that we call in Kikongo Kamutue, or in Nago Ori, is the most important Orisha or divinity in our life. Is the divinity of our destiny. If Ori, or if head is strong, head will accomplish. If head is weak, head is not going to have capacity to benefit. So even though I'm doing a Vajrayana ritual, I also have this on the back of my mind, this understanding. And you can feed head with some substances, like especially coconut water or cola nuts and some other elements, but you can also feed the hands and feed the feet. And what keeps our vitality and our resistance to trauma, physical trauma or emotional trauma, strong? It's our law. Our law that in the 15th day of the month, it's right here. And in the 30th day and the first day of the month is on the feet, moving. So it's my personal understanding that has nothing to do with what I thought I learned from my teachers, but this is something that I particularly have in the back of my mind, that I'm also feeding head. I'm also balancing the la, which I'm going to leave it here today as vitality, because we might be able to have a whole session just talking about the la, but that's how I also bring my personal understanding on the situation of the patient. If I have a patient who I open my divination, my Yijing, and I get the trigram heaven. Where are you, heaven? I think it's here. Heaven has to do with head. And if head, any trigram needs heaven, it means that the person needs some kind of balance on the head. So many times I use through to for bring balance to the head. Or sometimes if I see that there's disharmony in the line, because the I Ching has 6 lines, right? The bottom line is the line of the head of the feet. If I find a moving line on the feet, for me, I will ask in the Trangmo if that person needs some kind of feeding of her feet, or la massage in the feet during the new moon. So as you can see, you need to have understanding of occult, so to speak. No, that's not a good word. Subtle anatomy, astrological cycles, understanding of subtle psychopathology, psychosomatic pathology, and understand how Vajrayana ritual can be useful in the context of the system of assessment that you use for that particular case. So that's the story.
Thank you, Drupon, Pema Rigdzin. Feel that perhaps we could meet and discuss further more of these
Yeah.
practices. And before we leave, is there anything that you'd like to share, or how people can connect with you in terms of divinations or some of your ceremonies, activities, teachings? How can we follow up with you?
I hope I'm going to get a website soon. But in the meanwhile, you can find me on Facebook, Pema Rigdzin, in Instagram, Pema Rigdzin, and
YouTube, there are some videos too as well.
YouTube,
Mm.
also Pema Rigdzin. I recently uploaded analysis of a tanka of Vajrayana protectors in Spanish, in English, and Portuguese. So you have a different version for your language. And at the same time, I also brought old videos here from Vajrayana Foundation about purbas and treasure vases and so forth. You can have a lot of fun, I hope.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. We hope that you'll come and share more soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. It's always great to have you around.
Thank
you.